The goddamn mother flipper.
This son of a bitch.
Wow, these mics really do pick up.
Mm-hmm.
Hello and welcome to Mount Rushmore. I'm Jeff, and with me as always are Richard.
Hello.
And Michael.
Howdy.
Mount Rushmore. This is a show where we debate the top 4 things of any certain thing, and Michael and Richard are the ones who are going to be at odds debating those things. But I, as the judge, get to decide what is going to go up onto the Mount Rushmore, and I'm going to make the Mount Rushmore harder to climb this year. As always, Michael and Richard will have to make a convincing or at least entertaining argument whether a choice belongs on the Mount Rushmore. But then I've got my own choices, and I might try to put them up on there on the Mount Rushmore too. So this week's topic is the Mount Rushmore of movies that were never made. Okay.
So this was mine, and I've always just been fascinated by, even though I'm not in the industry, the process of how some movies get made that you look at and go, there's no way that should get made.
Yeah.
And other movies don't get made that look like they should be hits, and then why some movies didn't get made, and you can say, well, yeah, of course that didn't get made. That's horrible.
Okay, so Richard has chosen the topic, and Michael, you take your first stab at it.
I have 4 categories this week.
Okay.
The first category is called Well, Not This Version. And doing research, this seemed to be the movie that everyone lamented the most that wasn't made, but they kind of eventually made it, which was Dune, but it was Jodorowsky's Dune.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I guess in
Ron Jaworski, the former quarterback for the Eagles. No wonder it didn't get made.
I think it's Jodorowsky. Just
okay.
Jodorowsky, yeah, sorry.
I was reading it and, whatever. I made the very minimal attempt to pronounce his name.
Yeah.
His name is Jaws. That's why they
call him Jaws.
That's why they call him Jaws on the NFL.
Joan Armatrading's Dune was amazing. Why do you think? Is it both? Is it amazing? I've seen the doc on that. It's an amazing.
Yeah.
Both why and why it didn't. You can almost see both arguments there.
I think it was one of those. What made me think of this was actually a text between you and me a couple weeks ago, Jeff, where Rogue One had just come out.
Yeah.
And I think you sent me an article about, people complaining about why didn't we get the movie that we thought we were going to get from the trailer.
Yeah.
And there's been a bunch of back and forth from like the director and the studio saying, we shot a bunch of stuff. A lot of it was really cool. And a lot of the marketing department from Disney was just like, we have to use this shot, but it just didn't make it to the trailer. And movies get, the script gets changed and things get changed and writers come in, and there's a whole number, like you said, there's a whole number of reasons why a movie is or isn't made, or Richard said that, but Dune, at least that version of Dune, seemed to be one that was way too ambitious, way too crazy, was going to be 14 hours long.
Well, yeah, Jodorowsky was a very kind of cult, avant-garde, surrealist.
It was going to be
filmmaker.
psychedelic, and the people that were attached to it, Salvador Dali was going to be in it, and a lot of the elements that came out of the movie seemed to have been more interesting, like Dan O'Bannon and H.R. Geiger, who were part of the special effects and the design aspect of it. They went on to do Alien.
Yeah.
And would Alien have ever come about, or what kind of that movie probably wouldn't have happened without the seeds of it being within this,
somebody was
crazy other movie.
Yeah, setting the template for the space opera and how that was depicted visually. Would we have had Flash Gordon? Would we have had the Lynch Dune?
Well, I mean, people owning the properties of why a movie doesn't get made, like Richard said, Star Wars was supposed to be Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
George Lucas couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon, so he wrote his own. He wrote his own version of Flash Gordon, and you could see how something like this would happen when you have a $10 million budget, $2 million of it spent way beforehand, and then you get to shooting something and they realize this is never going to work.
One thing I love about this choice is that it is one of those, did it not get made or did it? Because in a way, the children of this film have been birthed throughout the industry.
I almost excluded it for that reason, but it seemed like it would have been a totally different movie. And there are reasons why I included it, which we'll get into later with another pick. But it seems like people wanted to see this, or people on the internet, I guess.
Right.
Like, people are lamenting that this movie was never made, but, hey, we got Sting.
Do you think? Yeah, I was gonna say. Do you think?
I mean, come on, guys, we got Sting, and
I say that every day of my life. I just wake up, cross myself.
we got a
Thank God for Gordon Sumner.
We got a David Lynch Dune movie, which in theory, I can imagine if the first version of Dune, if his version of Dune was made, and someone like in 2010 had heard out, oh my God, there's going to be a David Lynch Dune movie. Why couldn't we have gone to see that one? I think you were kind of lost either way.
Or do people lament this version of it because the David Lynch version wound up being such a goddamn mess?
That could be accurate too.
I mean, I love David Lynch. It's not watchable. I don't care what version. There's like 3 different cuts of it.
Yeah.
They're all unwatchable.
He was attached to do Star Wars Return of the Jedi, or
he was,
Revenge of the Jedi. And so was there was David Lynch, and there's another David Cronenberg. George Lucas had gone to both of these guys, and like 2 guys that seem so very far out of field of like the Star Wars universe.
Oh yeah.
And it's amazing that, like, I guess not amazing, but directors certainly bring a vision to a movie, and it's a shame that, like, the David Lynch Dune one was just...
Well, had Lynch not done Dune, maybe we would have gotten John Hughes' Eraserhead. Well, okay, Michael came out swinging with Jodorowsky's Dune. Richard, what's your first?
So my first one is, I think, a movie everyone deserves to see. Because when you combine Jerry Lewis's talent with the comedy settings of Auschwitz, how can you go wrong? And I'm, of course, talking about The Day the Clown Cried, which, if you're not familiar with it, I will just summarize it as briefly as I can, which is essentially a clown gets sent to a concentration camp and decides to become a clown for the kids in the Jewish section, which is right next to where he's at for political prisoners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds freaking hilarious.
Winds up getting sent to Auschwitz, and is tasked with calming the kids down as they are loaded from the boxcar to the gas chamber.
Huh.
So, wacky comedy.
Wacky comedy. Now, this is, for those who listening thought they might have been told the plot to Jacob the Liar, which was the Robin Williams film. This is this was late era Jerry Lewis. Was this one he also directed too?
Oh yeah, he directed this. This was like his passion project.
Yeah. Supposedly Harry Shearer has seen this. So there's people who have seen this and have required eye bleach to unsee the things that they've seen.
So the film was made but not released.
Yeah, there was basically the person who originally financed it only wound up paying a fraction of what he owed to get the rights to the film. And Jerry Lewis put like $2 million of his money into it anyway, and then could never secure the rights. And they all decided it was so awful it should never see the light of day. But to Jeff's point, yes, there have been a select few people who have, over the years, seen it. Harry Shearer is one of them. And I think there was an article in Spy Magazine about this back in the 90s. And one of Harry Shearer's quotes is like, I think he says something to the effect of, "It's like going to Tijuana and seeing a black velvet painting about Auschwitz."
Wow, that's hilarious.
You just look at it and go, this is so wrong, but somebody is trying to like get a heartfelt sentiment about something out.
Yeah.
But it's so poorly done and just inconceivably like
I was gonna
bad.
ask, in spite of the obviously the touchy subject matter and maybe like a questionable, like he probably approached it with a certain sense of, who knows? Yeah. I mean, I guess the question: what was outside of the subject matter? What was so bad about it? What was so eye-bleachingly?
I think also you cannot separate that from Jerry Lewis's maudlin identity on telethons and things like that, and the maudlin. So we've seen guys like Mel Brooks deal very humorously with the very touchy subject of Nazis, and Steven Spielberg turning them into very effective bad guys. But I think Lewis and his cloying maudlin performance almost seemed to be needing so much attention and
so like the character was originally written like Carl Schmidt, and he was supposed to be a former like circus clown, like successful, who had fallen on hard times because he was a total dick to everybody. They changed of course Jerry Lewis gets attached. They changed the character's name to Helmut Dork,
Yeah.
And he goes from being like this kind of, jackass, like self-important character to kind of this Emmett Kelly sad sack who's actually not a good clown, but he doesn't realize it until he gets in front of the kids in the concentration camp who all love him. So he becomes like this Pied Piper leading the kids into the showers. Yeah.
That was every review of the potential movie.
Are we sure about this, boys? So yeah, it was exceedingly poorly funded. So people who have seen it have just said it's, any shot where there's supposed to be a crowd, it's just shot against black because it's like, oh, it's an artistic choice. No, they didn't have any money.
It's 0 people.
So they couldn't get a crowd. And let me read you from the Spy Magazine article. I've actually got it up. Here is his reaction to the producer asking him to play the part. Why don't you try getting Sir Laurence Olivier? I mean, he doesn't find it too difficult to choke to death playing Hamlet. And then he shrugs and sits back and thinks about it. What a horror. It must be told.
By the way, Richard is recording this sitting on a stool. It's all black behind him. There's a single spotlight shining right down. You gotta get a spot on one.
Glavin.
And
Glavin. Oh, my Glavin.
in a perfect impression.
All right, so
It's so bad. I mean, earlier this year, about 30 minutes of the movie actually was dug up. There was, I think it was a German or Dutch. I think it was Dutch documentary that had been shot around the making of it that obviously never got aired, but someone found it. So there's about 30 minutes of the movie that's been able to be pieced together. So if you go on YouTube, you can see just how just terribly conceived and poorly executed this thing would be. I mean, even like you mentioned Jacob the Liar, which kind of wound up becoming, they tried to remake this at some point, and Robin Williams was attached.
Life is Beautiful was ultimately kind of a wacky guy in a concentration camp.
And you watch that again, and it's not that great. It really doesn't work. But at the time, I remember thinking like, wow, they actually pulled this off, and that would be impossible to pull off. Picture not being able to pull that off on any level. That's Jerry Lewis as a concentration camp clown.
Okay, so this is controversy. I think I know the guys, and I think I know what kind of answers they're going to give. And I love that they always challenge the categories when it comes to what we discuss here. But sometimes Richard even challenges what we think the question is, or what we think the topic is. So we've kind of blown it up here from Mount Rushmore of movies that were never made to movies that were never seen or made, perhaps. So we've each leveraged our first. We've each put in our first. These guys have each put in their first choice. Michael, what's your second?
My next one is under the category of missed window, and that is Beetlejuice 2, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian.
Oh, good gracious.
And this was a potential sequel to the 1987 movie Beetlejuice, obviously, by Tim Burton. And it was written by a gentleman named Jonathan Gems. And this partially might have been written as a joke.
As his holograms?
I don't get that joke.
Gems.
Gem and the Holograms?
Gems and the holograms.
Oh, I should have got that joke. I'm more mad at me than mad at you. Although I should be mad.
Be mad at me.
I should be mad at you, but I'm gonna.
We're all clearly mad at our listeners.
I'm giving myself Indian burns. But basically, it was a sequel to Beetlejuice that kind of started getting a little bit of traction. And, because it was a successful movie. Maybe it didn't make a ton of money, but it made enough. And basically, the minimal plot is that the Dietzes buy property on Hawaii, and of course they buy it on like the top of some sort of ancient burial ground or over some sort of volcano god's whatever, and Beetlejuice follows them there.
Wait a second, this is a Brady Bunch episode.
They probably use some of that script. I mean, to make a Beetlejuice movie.
Yeah. Was Tim Burton attached to it?
He was. He was supposedly going to direct it. Eventually, he left to go make another. He left to go make Batman.
Yeah.
And never heard of it.
What a poor career choice.
But I mean, I think I love the idea of this movie just because it's Beetlejuice in Hawaii. Apparently, at the end of the movie, he was going to win some big surf competition, and just the visuals of all of that happening, probably with that, a Danny Elfman score,
yeah,
and set against, I'm sure, a very 1950s or 60s
Yeah.
visual look plus,
I feel like I'm doing a mind meld with you, and I think both of us are maybe imagining Tim Burton's touches when doing Pee-wee's Big Adventure and applying that to a Beetlejuice film, perhaps. It had that kind of silly, campy,
yeah. But I think this, there have been, even as close as the last couple of years with Michael Keaton's kind of return to popularity after Birdman and Winona Ryder kind of being super popular after Stranger Things of like, oh, let's do another Beetlejuice sequel and, only if everybody gets involved. And listen, this movie's never like this movie, Beetlejuice 2, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian, which is just an amazing title.
It's insane. It's insane.
And it's weird because it's like, it's one of those titles that seems too campy, but would only work if it happened then and there and happened with Tim Burton attached, and who knows what he's working on now. But I want to see that movie, and it's a shame that there's probably only scraps of it in a PDF online someplace.
Allow me to read, because I was researching this at one point. Beetlejuice takes the job, but also uses the afterlife version of Rohypnol to make Lydia fall in love with him. The two hook up, and Lydia even agrees to get married to Beetlejuice.
See, I don't want to see that.
Yeah,
movie.
you don't want to see that.
Maybe there are some aspects that came out of like the Beetlejuice cartoon where they were like best friends.
Yeah,
but I don't want to see that movie anymore.
Okay, Richard, what's your second choice?
Okay, my second choice is a movie by someone who seems to have a lot of issues getting his movies made in the way he wants to get them made, and that's Terry Gilliam. And the movie is The Man Who Killed Don Quixote.
Also on my list.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Not Donkey Odie from the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood. Different character.
I like that. I noticed that a couple of my choices, the movie that was made was featured a documentary about how this movie was never made.
Yeah, it was a disaster.
Whether it's the Dune movie or it was Lost in La Mancha.
Right, which is a great documentary if you guys get a chance to see it. Basically, Terry Gilliam has a history of having documentarians on his set, partially so if something goes really wrong, he has his own version of the events that he can kind of fall back on. This was under my category of cursed, and you could imagine that, like just reading about this movie and seeing how from the go it was just never going to happen. So it was started being, I don't know, shot, but at least conceived in 1998. Had a budget of about $32 million, which was none of it came from the U.S. It was all like French, continental Europe funding.
You don't want that money. That's all tainted money.
Yeah.
What smells? Oh, our budget.
Our budget smells like surrender. And the basic plot is Johnny Depp winds up going back in time. He's like a modern person who goes back in time to and winds up meeting like an older Don Quixote as he's still tilting at windmills or whatever. As with any Terry Gilliam film, I can't quite understand exactly what's happening in the plot.
Yeah.
And they get ready to shoot. Everything's going well. And then, let's just say a series of incidents happen. Mm-hmm. First off, the actor they hired to play an aging Don Quixote, Jean Rochefort, spent 7 months learning how to speak English for the role because he's French. He didn't have a great grasp of the language. Turned out the first day they realized that he had such a bad back and like other medical issues that he couldn't ride a horse. It was like physically painful. Like he needed a hip replacement, which if you're, spoiler alert, there's a lot of horses in the Don Quixote story.
I like that aspect of it, especially.
What if I were to be on a Segway? Would that work? Terry, I have an idea. This will save the film.
What if I am in a Saab? I am driving a Saab.
You could tell this movie was doomed by the fact that insurance sucked up $15 million of the $32 million budget, paying off this guy's medical bills and the insurance claim against him.
Yeah, it was a double herniated disc. Which is not what you want from your...
Well, that should be fine, because once it gets herniated, then it gets herniated back.
Re-herniated.
If he had a triple herniated disc, that would be an issue. But once it gets double herniated, then it's good, right?
Does Gilliam not know when a French actor says, Terry, it hurts a lot? No, just come to the movie. How did he not know?
Maybe, like God cursed him from like all of the little animations he did for him on Monty Python.
Yeah.
He's like, that's not me. Fuck this guy for the rest of his life.
I'm flattening you with a foot.
Or he thought he was French and was like just complaining about anything and everything. So that happens. The first day of shooting, their first location is near Madrid, like this kind of barren area that's north of it. Which, when they scouted it, didn't realize it was right near a military base. So every half hour or so, these military jets would come screaming right over the top of them.
Wow.
Then the second day, a giant flash flood comes and washes away basically the entire set and all their equipment.
And then the locusts come.
And then
there's the frogs. One of my the other great aspects of this is that he's so persistent about this movie. Like, he has this vision that he won't let go. He's still trying to make it today. There's a version of it that he's trying to make that has Adam Driver attached.
Oh.
And Michael Palin.
And is he?
Yeah. Oh. He's playing the Don Quixote. And yeah, it got delayed again.
Yeah.
Just got delayed in October.
Because they didn't have funds. Yeah.
We're at our halftime here at Mount Rushmore, and we want to invite you to take this moment, even just while you're listening to the dulcet tones of my voice, to go and download, rate, and review all the back episodes on iTunes. We have a whole year of this show on iTunes, and we'd love for you to become familiar with them. Your rate and review does really mean a lot to us, and it means a lot to the future fans who might want to find this podcast if they enjoy it. Also join us on Facebook, where we have a thriving online community of people who are talking about the choices and the picks and the categories and are suggesting their own. So we've done episodes of this show based on the suggestions from our loyal fans. Also, there is Instagram, where you get to see the cover art from our iTunes. And Snapchat, girl, it's going to be coming, yo.
And if Instagram is good enough for Tom Brady, who recently just picked Instagram as his next social media outlet of record. Like, literally did the high school football thing where he had hats of like Instagram and Snapchat.
Oh, he did?
And LinkedIn and a few others. And then filmed himself making the choice.
Oh my God.
GOAT. Greatest of all time right there, boys.
Okay, yeah, so, and also, you can follow us on FlipZap. I just thought of that, FlipZap. Nobody else please take that. It's FlipZap. I don't know what it is.
Trademark. I just said trademark. So
well, you said trademark?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
No, it's for the show.
Mark, the only mark we need is Zuckerberg. Dude, fun FlipZap. So we're back. Michael and Richard doubled up on La Mancha, so Richard's going to go to his third.
I've doubled up on La Mancha a couple of times, but that's a family show. We don't need to talk about that. By the way, every once in a while, I'll make a comment sort of double entendre laden like that. And Vivian, my daughter, listens to the show every week with Sarah. There's been a few awkward conversations we had over the, apparently. They'll get home after listening to an episode and Sarah go, so yeah, about that episode last week where you said...
They have they do see the big red E, right? That's next to our list for explicit.
I thought the big red E was just for everything is great.
For everyone.
So my next one is, I think the first two were ones that probably would have been... Certainly, the Jerry Lewis one would have been crap. It's debatable about the Don Quixote one, but this is one that seems like everyone really wanted to see, and it just never got made, which is Crusade, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, sure.
And directed by Paul Verhoeven.
Mm-hmm.
And this was going to be, I think, I'm trying to think what year this was. I think it was like 1990.
This is probably going to be like a late 90s, post-Terminator, Schwarzenegger at the height of his Schwarzeneggerness,
yeah. So yeah, it's like 98. So essentially, it was their take on the Crusades, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. But obviously, with the two of them, you're going to get a lot of fighting, a lot of blood and guts.
That was the Crusades.
A lot of space lasers, a lot of space spiders. Oh wait, I'm mixing up some of my Paul Verhoeven films. And apparently the script was fantastic. Part of the problem was that it was very much a balanced take on the Crusades. So Arnold Schwarzenegger plays a serf turned thief who ends up almost getting hung for being a thief, and winds up performing a fake miracle to get out of it, and they see that and go, well, you'd be a perfect person to fight in the Crusades. So like the Pope gets him, the evil Pope, gets him to go out to the Crusades. And that's the thing. It shows the fact that the Crusades were just awful all around, and that this was a perfect example of Christianity, oppressing and terrorizing everyone else. Oddly enough, that made it hard to get made.
It's weird because that seems like something that would have a lot of traction nowadays, like showing a balanced side. Maybe in the late 90s, it would have been like, oh, we can't do that. We would offend too many Christians. But like, if you made a film nowadays that kind of showed a more balanced, more realistic version of the Crusades, I think people would be more offended if you didn't. Yeah, like you would be on the hot seat for that. I do love Arnold Schwarzenegger in any film.
Oh, sure.
Where he's, he's like, he's just one of the people, yet he is built like, two brick shit houses. Yeah, it's like there's just that lowly serf. Why is he 6'2", 300 pounds and all muscle? Whatever,
What was that movie where he
moves rocks
a year or two ago, where he was like a sheriff in like West
Last
Texas?
Man Standing.
I saw that.
Like that.
And they always have to write in like this sort of like, what?
I just got stung by a bee, so I'm very swollen for the whole movie.
They have to write. They always have to write in that thing where it's like, when I moved over here when I was 17 to join the army.
But yeah, I always think that was funny, the justification of Arnold, or in Conan the Barbarian, where he's lashed to a grist mill of some kind, and then all the other children die.
Oh yeah, that's right. He starts off like relatively small,
and then a little kid, yeah. But if you spend your whole life pushing one thing around and all the other kids die, then you have incredibly developed lats somehow.
Well, that's the workout that I've been doing at my local 24-hour fitness. They've got just a big mill there. So this movie had like a great cast attached to it. It had Charlton Heston as Pope Urban II, kind of scheming and trying to get the whole crusade happening for his own political and financial reasons.
I don't know.
It
had late 90s Charlton Heston.
Hey, you saw Wayne's World too.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Okay.
It had Robert Duvall, had Jennifer Connelly was attached to it, and it was like ready to go. And there was an interview with Arnie, as I like to call him, a few years ago, and he basically said it had $100 million budget, and Paul Verhoeven, like sets were made and everything, and Paul Verhoeven just started going nuts and like over budgeting everything. And the producers asked him, so how are we going to keep this thing under budget? And he kind of goes, what do you mean keeping it under budget? That's not a good way to get a movie greenlit either. So I would have loved to see this. I know there's been some talk over the years of trying to get this rebooted with different actors. And I think this is one that would actually work. Like you guys said, obviously very relevant to today. Turns out that instead of funding the Crusade movie, Carolco, which was the company that was financing it, wound up financing Cutthroat Island.
Oh, good choice.
Yeah, really worked out well for don't spend that extra $20 million on a Schwarzenegger Paul Verhoeven film. No. And we need more Gina Davis as a pirate and Matthew Modine shirtless. That's what's going to make us money.
Okay, Michael, you're up.
My last choice is under the category of produced to death, and that is The Death of Superman /
Superman Lives
/ AKA Superman Lives. Both basically one in the same film that never got made. This was also a Tim Burton joint, written by Kevin Smith, at least initially, before it was kind of taken out of his hands and then rewritten. And I like, this is one of those, any sort of Superman film seems like it would be okay, let's rephrase that. Superman 4 was not good. The Quest for Peace was really a terrible movie, and I'm guessing that people had this in mind when they're starting to give money towards a new Superman project. The producer on this was John Peters, who he had a few different things that he needed to have in the film. One of them, Superman in a black suit, which was fine in the comic books at the time. Superman had died. This was right after, I guess, in 93, Superman had died in the comics, and he was put in this Kryptonian suit, and he came back, and he looked cool.
Is that when we had, like, the multiple Supermans, like the Black Superman, John Henry Irons, I think it was?
Yeah, had Steel, had Superboy, had the Eradicator's Superman, and there was for Cyborg Superman. So like the property was pretty hot again because they killed him off. So one of the stipulations: Superman in black suit. Cool. Superman could not fly, which, all right, you go back to the original Superman concept.
he
and
just jumped.
He leapt over buildings. Yeah. Okay. Superman had to fight a robotic spider at the end. This is where things start to get like...
Didn't he have to do that because the producer really likes spiders?
Yeah, you will later see the spider turn up in the movie Wild Wild West.
That's hilarious.
That was produced by John Peters. So it's amazing when a producer gets his hands on something and influences the script and the production to the point where he's obsessed. He's got to have his spiders. He's got to have his spiders. I got to have my spiders in this movie. It's Superman doesn't fight spiders.
Like we were talking about Spielberg, wasn't he divorcing a robotic spider at that point? I think, and he was just trying to get back at her, I think. So those were the outrageous requirements.
Oh, there were more. Brainiac was a character in the film, possibly to be played by Christopher Walken, which... Oh, I forgot to mention, Nicolas Cage was going to be Superman.
Yeah.
And there's like footage of this.
If you see the production stills of Nicolas Cage in this long-haired wig and him just being so geeked out, because he's like a big comic books fan. Like, he did Ghost Rider basically because he needed to be in a comic book movie at some point. And
also money, yes.
So Cage is Superman.
So Cage is Superman, Tim Burton directing, Kevin Smith writing, John Peters producing. Hey, what can go wrong? Well, everything. They end up dragging their feet on the production of it. Tim Burton, the script keeps getting written and rewritten and casting keeps changing. And then Tim Burton's like, I'm out of here. And he goes off to go make Sleepy Hollow, which ended up being pretty successful.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a nice move, pretty fun. And it's just one of those movies that, there's too many cooks in the kitchen and there's too many things that had to happen. And, I almost didn't include it when I mentioned earlier because of Dune. Because, a few years later in 2002 or 3 or whatever, Superman Returns came out by Bryan Singer. And I really liked it. They kind of played him a little bit more strange. It was...
There was an actual alien.
Yeah, there were nods to... There were nods to the first 2 Superman movie, and kind of they ignored the Richard Pryor and the Quest for Peace ones. So that movie probably would have only gotten made because this one didn't. But I would have loved to have seen whatever this creative endeavor would have been. Like a Tim Burton Superman movie, he did Batman, and the first 2 Batman were great. And of course you're going to want to dig your hands into another material, especially when you see a character as Superman is, as this alien.
Yeah, if Superman were Edward Scissorhands, this cast out weirdo who had these powers that were both his strength and his weakness at the same time, that distanced him from people. That would be pretty freaking cool. I feel like this was okay, Neapolitan ice cream. It's vanilla, the boringest flavor. It's strawberry, the pussiest flavor. And it's chocolate, a pretty good flavor, but it's not like anything, But if Neapolitan were mint chip bubblegum and, cookie dough or something, it wouldn't work because it'd be these 3 eccentric things all in the same bowl together.
Yeah.
It seems like that's what that movie was, right?
It seemed like it. And eventually the budget was cut from $190 million to $100 million to, they were just like, well, we're just not going to do this
Sock
anymore.
puppets.
Yeah.
Sock puppets.
And it just, eventually it became, like Dune did and Lost in La Mancha did. It just became fodder for another making or unmaking of or making of documentary of things that just never happened. And I love that aspect when I'm watching a movie. Like when I watch The Lord of the Rings, I don't just want to watch The Lord of the Rings. I want to watch the making of documentary and the commentaries. And my wife Emily loves the design work that goes into the costuming and is always like, that shit is just so amazing.
Yeah, I remember watching the Criterion edition of Hamburger, the motion picture. Really gets you in depth. I think what it shows a little bit is sometimes there's dangers when everyone involved is such a fan of the basic concept or the brand that's underlying it, or the character, in this case was Superman, that it's hard to divorce them from their personal belief and love for what that character should be.
Yeah.
Kevin Smith, obviously a giant Superman fan, giant geek in general, had a very specific vision for this. And from what I understand, it was more of a soulful rumination on kind of dying and aging and what it would mean to actually be Superman, which the studio's never going to want. I mean, they don't.
They want a giant spider to fight Superman at some point.
Yeah, and so
Polar
you've
bear.
got that kind of, cross between the two. And Kevin Smith, if he starts to see that happening, he's just going to walk away. And Tim Burton's got 20 other things he can work on. So if he thinks the studio is meddling too much, he's going to walk away.
He's got a backlog of striped things and striped, like all these different swirly patterns that he needs to put someplace. I got to get this in a movie, guys.
Also, he was insisting that Helena Bonham Carter played the spider. The studio didn't like that, and I kind of just...
Okay, Richard.
So I think the only thing that could have been worse than Jerry Lewis at Auschwitz is what this was, which is E.T. 2 Nocturnal Fears.
Oh, okay.
So this was a sequel that...
That name is hilarious.
It sounded not... Yeah, there's nothing... Whenever you put nocturnal in a movie...
No.
Especially about movies with kids involved, that's asking for trouble. So Steven Spielberg and the writer of E.T., Melissa Matheson, got together a couple years after, pretty soon after E.T. became this huge hit, and banged out a 9-page outline in about like a week or so of writing. And it's a bit darker than E.T. It kind of picks up with the same kids, Elliot and Drew Barrymore and all the wacky cast of kids. And they see another spaceship come, and turns out that there's aliens who look like E.T. except they're albino, and they're from the same planet, and they really don't like the brown-skinned aliens, so they're searching for him. They're looking for E.T., whose real name is Zrek, and they're basically evil, and they wind up they're on Earth. They just wind up killing forest animals with mental powers for fun. They wind up kidnapping Elliot and his sister and torturing them for information about where Zrek is.
Wow. It's like they're reading my mind. With Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, we got the darker Spielberg. This sounds like the darker Spielberg at hand.
But darker. I mean, these are kids. However old Elliot was supposed to be, what, 11? Something like that?
Yeah, maybe. Not even. I mean, he was like 9, maybe 10.
Yeah, getting tortured and thrown in a cell with his younger sister who got tortured.
I know that Spielberg, a lot of these guys tend to hold on to their ideas if they're never fully formed. I believe that the television series Falling Skies that came out 4 or 5 years ago, I think Spielberg was like executive producer. I think he exercised a lot of his like, I've got all of this good ET's invade the Earth material in my head that I still need to get out. Let's throw it on a TV show and call it something else, and there you go.
And then it ends with E.T. showing up at the very end to rescue them, saving the day, and then flying back off to his home planet. Making like
listen.
Suddenly he turns into like Arnold Schwarzenegger to go back to this, just sort of showing up at the end with guns ablazing.
I would like to see.
It's kind of Gandhi too, a little bit.
I would like to see the early E.T., where he's like skinny, and then by the end of it, after he's turned that grist wheel, he's this huge buff E.T.
Well, that people don't realize Reese's Pieces is actually a good form of protein. So you just load up on that.
Well,
you're ready to go.
What aspect of this potential sequel makes you so interested in it, Richard?
Because it makes me angry. It makes me angry that Steven Spielberg even thought this was a good idea for any point of time, enough to actually work on a treatment for this. Later on he said, well, I don't think we would ever do that. It would rob the original of its virginity, which is exactly what he said. Which again, Nocturnal Fears, virginity. Let's quit it.
Vivian, go to bed.
Yeah, good night. Turn this off. Come back next episode.
Come back 20 years from now.
But this is Spielberg at his peak. And at some point, like, nothing clicked with him. And it's obvious he was itching to do more, adult, non-action, kid-based, or, kind of the stuff that he had thought of when he was a kid, the types of movies he wanted to make, kind of these serials and sci-fi movies and stuff like that.
Okay, so this is the point where I, the judge, stall a little bit before I make my choice. And just a reminder, we're changing things up in terms of the judging this year on Mount Rushmore. where I'm in charge of the mountain here. I get to decide what's carved in. And I'm not going to pick an entire gentleman's choice. That sounds like something you'd...
The gentleman's choice.
Get at the
Sounds like a
whorehouse.
strip club, yeah.
Out around the world is too expensive for me. I would like gentleman's choice.
Up next on the stage, it's Charity. Performing the gentleman's choice.
Why is it just a pogo stick? You're not a true gentleman. So I'm not going to pick just one or the other of these guys. I'm going to pick and choose buffet style from their choices. And one of those choices might be something I choose. My choice this week is something that's both the sequel I always wanted and the sequel I always hated. And that was Blues Brothers 2000. So Blues Brothers 2000 was kind of a compromise of Dan Aykroyd and John Landis's original screenplay for Blues Brothers. The Blues Brothers that we saw in the theaters, which I adored when it came out as a kid, I couldn't imagine having my mind blown any farther than to see these cool SNL Blues Brothers guys who I'd seen on TV, and then be introduced to R&B. You know, I'd heard of James Brown, I've heard of I loved Ray Charles, but there was a lot of music from Aretha Franklin and Cab Calloway and the Stax record crew. That was just a mind-blowing thing and a rebirth of the movie musical. I thought it was amazing. And then Aykroyd got fat. And then Aykroyd got old. And then John Belushi got dead. And then they put out this trash fire of a movie, The Blues Brothers 2000, which just seemed like everybody just kind of nodding to this original brilliant production of their youth. But it was a lot of the same plot that Aykroyd had tapped out in Blues Brothers Meet the Voodoo Queen. They go down south. They encounter the birth of blues or the origin of blues, and there's all this great stuff that happens in such a hackneyed, horrible way. Landis talks about the studio making them add a kid, so they added this Brody Buster kid. They had to add John Goodman. They had to do all this stuff. So it was just a thing that you wanted to have happen and that you wished would never have happened.
Was James Belushi, as I believe he's known among the literary set.
The James Belushi.
Was he involved in that?
I don't know if he ever was. He was not in the film.
Yeah, but he does like the crappy Blues Brothers like rip-off thing.
Yeah, so that was my choice, the Blues Brothers Meet the Voodoo Queen. And were I to have a second, it would have been inspired by Michael, your choice, and that is this movie that's still listed as in development with Danny DeVito, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and with Eddie Murphy, Triplets, the sequel to Twins.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that'll be horrible if it ever comes out. But I can imagine it being interesting. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, it is the second episode of Mount Rushmore for the new year, and it's now time to list, with my granite chiseling sound effect, the faces in the shape of movies.
Wow, it's a lot like the end of the Dragnet.
Yeah.
The Mark V or whatever it was.
This one little hammer that you imagine Jack Webb did himself. Okay, and so here is the Mount Rushmore of movies that never were, to our mind at least. And the first, because these guys agreed upon it, they each get a point for The Man Who Killed Don Quixote.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's tied up. All right, the second, because of Michael's effusive discourse on what he thought this could have been, how it could have been amazing, how it could have been so different, yet so inspired by the original, Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian. It comes in second. And oh my gosh, it's a Michael streak, Superman, and the death of Superman and Superman Lives. I really enjoyed your impassioned discussion on how you thought it was kind of beaten to death, produced to death, and what it could have been. And then coming in fourth, Crusade. And what I think is so interesting about this is, like, I know that, Richard observes the film industry and stuff, and how films are made and how they become bloated, and how you get action stars who maybe are a little bit past their prime but still pretty awesome, like Schwarzenegger, but then you slather on another past their prime action star like Charlton Heston, and pretty soon the film almost becomes sunk by its own ego. So those are the choices of the films that never were for this episode of Mount Rushmore. It's been great talking to you. As always, I'm Jeff.
I'm Richard.
I'm Michael.